The phone rang just after breakfast. The house was quiet, except for the slow ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of my refrigerator. I had been enjoying my retirement morning the same way I always did, with tea, a crossword, and a peaceful kind of silence that only comes after a lifetime of noise. Then came her voice, sharp, rushed, commanding. "I'm dropping off my 3 kids with you. You don't do anything anymore. You can watch them while I travel." For a second, I thought I misheard her. I held the phone tighter, the spoon in my cup clinking against porcelain. "Excuse me?" I said slowly. "You heard me," Laura repeated, as if I were a child needing instructions. "Mark and I have plans. The kids will be there tomorrow morning. You're retired. You can handle it. My name is Evelyn Carter, 66 years old. Widow. Mother. Grandmother. I spent 35 years as a school secretary, balancing chaos with grace and turning disorder into calm. I loved my students, I loved my work, and when I retired, I told myself I had earned the right to peace. And yet, here was my daughter-in-law, treating me like I was a convenient drop-off point. The phone was still pressed to my ear, but my mind had already wandered to my son. Mark, my only child. He was gentle like his father, always wanting to please. He married Laura 5 years ago, beautiful, sharp-tongued, and endlessly ambitious. I had tried to like her. I really had. But her tone that morning confirmed what I had feared for years. She didn't see me as family. She saw me as free labor. I looked out the kitchen window. The morning sun cast golden lines across the garden. My tea had gone cold, but my thoughts were hot with disbelief. "You're going on vacation?" I asked finally. "Business trip, then a little break after," she said, sounding distracted. "Anyway, I'll drop them off around 10. Oh, and don't give them too much sugar. Bye." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the silent phone for a moment, then started to laugh. A slow, quiet laugh that came more from understanding than amusement. Laura had no idea who she was talking to. She thought retirement meant surrender, that I'd been reduced to waiting for phone calls and babysitting requests. She had no idea that years of managing students, parents, and teachers had made me patient, observant, and strategic. I placed the phone on the counter and sat back down. I stirred my tea, once, twice, and thought of all the times I had said yes, every family dinner I hosted, every favor I agreed to, every time I watched those children without complaint. I had been kind, maybe too kind. And kindness without limits invites disrespect. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I had 2 choices. I could yell, scold, and give her exactly what she expected, an emotional outburst she'd later use as proof that I was difficult. Or I could stay silent and plan something better. I chose the second option. I stood up, grabbed my notepad from the drawer, and began to write. At the top of the page, I wrote one sentence. How to teach Laura respect, without a single argument. Underneath, I started listing ideas. I thought about schedules, boundaries, rules, and money. I thought about all the times I'd taught young teachers how to regain control of their classrooms. You don't shout at children. You set clear expectations and hold your ground. The same principle worked with adults who behaved like children. By the time I put down my pen, I had the skeleton of a plan. When Laura dropped off those kids, she would walk into my house thinking she was in charge. But by the time she came back from her trip, she'd learned that I wasn't her employee. I was their grandmother, and a grandmother who believed in lessons that stick. I looked up at my husband's photo on the wall, him in his uniform, smiling like he always did. "You'd have laughed at that call," I whispered. "You'd say, 'Don't let them walk all over you, Eve.'" I smiled. "Don't worry, love. I won't." I washed my teacup, dried it, and folded the towel neatly. My heart wasn't heavy. In fact, it felt light. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was preparing a boundary. Retirement wasn't the end of my story. It was the part where I finally learned to say no, without raising my voice. Tomorrow, Laura would bring those kids, expecting me to sigh and nod. Tomorrow, I'd smile, accept them, and let her leave thinking she'd won. Because sometimes, the best lessons don't start with anger. They start with patience. And end with clarity. She thought she was dropping off her kids. What she didn't know was that she was also dropping off her pride. She thinks I'm helpless. She has no idea how I plan to reply. If a family member ever demanded your time, would you set a boundary or let it slide? Like and subscribe for more true life stories of strength and self-respect. The next morning, the calm I'd built overnight was tested before the sun reached its peak. At exactly 10:07 a.m., a black SUV screeched to a stop in front of my house. From the window, I watched as the back doors burst open, and 3 small bodies tumbled out, arguing before their feet even hit the walkway. "Grandma!" shouted Lily, the youngest at 5, with her pigtails bouncing. Behind her came Max, 8, dragging a suitcase nearly his size, muttering, "Why do we have to stay here?" And finally, 11-year-old Sophie, arms crossed, earbuds in, eyes glued to her phone, the perfect reflection of her mother's attitude. Laura stepped out last, wearing sunglasses and a tight smile that didn't touch her eyes. She didn't look tired or rushed. She looked pleased with herself. "Mom!" she called to me as if she were doing me a favor. "Here we are. Bags, snacks, and their tablets. They've been fed. Oh, and don't let them have soda before bed." I opened the door slowly. "Good morning, Laura." She didn't answer that. Instead, she turned to the kids. "Be good for Grandma, okay?" Lily ran up and hugged me. Sophie barely looked up. Max sighed. Laura started to hand me a folded sheet of paper. "Their schedule, meals, bedtime, just keep them occupied. I'll call if there's anything urgent." "Where are you going again?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled, that sharp kind of smile that feels like a warning. "A little business trip, some me time after. You deserve some too, right?" Then, she did it. That small, careless roll of her eyes. It was quick, like a reflex. But I caught it. She muttered something under her breath, probably about how old people worry too much, then turned toward the car. Mark followed behind her, shoulders slumped. He looked like a man caught between peace and guilt. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Thanks for helping. I know this was last minute." I looked at him. My son. The same boy who once asked me to check his spelling homework, now unable to meet my eyes. "You didn't ask me," I said quietly. He hesitated. "Yeah, I know." He glanced toward Laura, who was already in the car. "She thought." "I know what she thought," I interrupted. My tone even. He gave a small helpless nod. "We'll bring souvenirs," he said, trying to lighten the mood. I didn't smile. "Drive safe, Mark." And then they were gone. Engine revving, tires crunching over gravel. Their car turning the corner until all that was left was the echo of the moment. Inside the house, the chaos began immediately. "Where's the Wi-Fi?" Sophie demanded, not looking up from her phone. "Can we have ice cream?" Max yelled from the kitchen, opening cabinets like he lived there. Lily twirled in the living room, knocking over a pillow. "Grandma, can we play princess?" For a second, I watched them like an outsider. Noise, motion, energy. Everything my quiet morning had not been. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt grounded. I had raised children before. I had run an entire school office. I knew how to handle disorder. I clapped my hands once. "All right, everyone, living room, now." They looked at me, surprised. Kids always expect adults to beg or plead. They didn't expect calm authority. When they gathered, I smiled. "We're going to have fun, but we'll have rules too. First rule, we respect each other and the house. Second, no yelling unless the house is on fire. Third, dessert comes after chores." Max blinked. "Chores?" "Light ones," I said, smiling. "Even superheroes have to clean up after saving the world." Sophie rolled her eyes. The resemblance to her mother was uncanny. I turned to her. And Rule 4. No screens at the table. I like to see your face when you talk. Her lips parted in disbelief, but I turned away before she could argue. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and placed a fresh note on the door, handwritten in bold letters. Hows, expectations, and rules. 1. Respect. 2. Responsibility. 3. Rest. 4. No exceptions. I taped it neatly in the center. Then I took a deep breath, poured lemonade into 3 cups, and brought them to the table. Snack time, I said calmly. Lily smiled. Max sat reluctantly. Sophie hesitated, but eventually joined. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the start of order. Outside, I could still hear the faint hum of traffic. Laura was probably halfway to the airport, thinking she'd dropped her problems at my doorstep. She thought this was a free babysitting favor, that I'd sit around, cook, clean, and keep quiet. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't doing this for her, I was doing it for those children. To teach them respect, patience, and maybe a little gratitude. And when she returned, she'd see the difference between being watched and being raised. I glanced once more at the note on the fridge. Simple words, firm boundaries. My peace wasn't gone, it was just being redefined. Laura had walked out thinking she'd won. She had no idea I had already started the lesson. She left thinking this would be a free pass. She had no idea I had already made a plan. Would you confront your child in the moment, or wait and respond strategically? By the second morning, I knew what needed to be done. The first day had shown me everything. The children's wild energy, the lack of discipline, and the invisible rule that Laura had planted in their minds. Grandma says yes to everything. That was about to change. After breakfast, which took an hour and ended with spilled milk, a broken cereal bowl, and Sophie complaining that my Wi-Fi was ancient, I sat down at the kitchen table with my notepad. The morning light fell across the page as I wrote in clean, steady lines. This wasn't anger, it was structure. At the top of the page I wrote, weekly schedule and house rules. Then I outlined everything. Practical, simple, and fair. Morning routine. Wake up by 8 a.m. Make your bed and tidy your space. Breakfast by 8:30. Chores. Sophie help fold laundry on Tuesdays and Fridays. Max sweep the porch and help with dishes. Lily pick up toys before dinner. Screen time. 1 hour in the afternoon after chores are complete. Meals. Lunch at 1 p.m. Dinner at 7 p.m. No devices at the table. Respect. Speak politely, no shouting. Everyone helps, everyone thanks. At the bottom, I added a short note. This home runs on respect and contribution. These are not punishments, they're life skills. I snapped a photo of the list and sent it to both Mark and Laura in our family group chat. My message was short and polite. Good morning. Here's the household routine while the kids are here. I want to make sure we all stay on the same page. Please confirm that you've received this. It took exactly 3 minutes for Mark to reply. Thanks, Mom. That was it. No questions, no objections, and no sign of actual support. I could almost hear his nervous tone through the screen, that familiar discomfort of a man caught between his wife and his mother. Then I waited. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. Nothing from Laura. I wasn't surprised. By noon, I got my answer. Not in the chat, but on social media. Lily had left her tablet on the couch. A notification popped up. Laura posted a story. Curiosity 1. I checked. The screen showed a picture of her with sunglasses and a coffee cup, standing beside an airport window. The caption read, "Finally, some peace and quiet while Grandma gets her new babysitting job." And below it, a laughing emoji. For a moment, I felt that old sting of disrespect. The kind that travels deeper than anger. The kind that tells you someone never saw your worth to begin with. But instead of responding, I took a breath and smiled. Let her think she was clever. Because the thing about boundaries is that they don't need applause, only enforcement. I turned back to the kitchen and taped the printed copy of the house rules to the refrigerator door. The kids noticed it instantly. "What's that?" Max asked. "The plan," I said, setting down my tea. "Every good team has one," Sophie groaned. "Seriously, Grandma, chores? This is like prison." I looked at her calmly. "No, dear, it's called home training." Max giggled. Lily clapped. Sophie sighed dramatically, muttering something about how, "Mom never makes us do this." I didn't answer. I'd learned long ago that silence can be the strongest reply. That afternoon, I followed every rule exactly as written, not harshly, but firmly. When Sophie refused to help with laundry, I didn't argue. I folded my clothes alone, humming softly. The next morning, she found her favorite shirt still wrinkled. She asked why. I said, "The person who wears it usually folds it." She didn't like it, but she understood. When Max complained about sweeping, I showed him how to hold the broom properly. Told him 10 minutes of work earns 10 minutes of play. By the third day, he did it without being asked. And little Lily, she picked up her toys proudly each evening, waiting for my approving nod. I gave it every time. Structure works. Still, I wasn't naive. Laura wouldn't appreciate my approach when she came back. So I started documenting everything: photos of meals, timestamps of bedtime, even screenshots of the rules I sent. Not out of spite, but for protection. Because if someone is willing to twist your kindness, you need truth to untwist it later. That night, as the children slept, I poured myself a cup of tea and scrolled through my messages again. Mark hadn't followed up. Laura hadn't written a single word. But I wasn't waiting for approval. I'd drawn a line, and I wasn't stepping back. I thought about the post she'd made, that smug caption about babysitting. She mocked my rules online. But she didn't realize the lesson was about to get practical. Not with words, but with actions. Because when she came back, she wouldn't find the same kids she left. She'd find discipline, calm, and a mirror of her own choices. And for once, she'd have to face what respect actually looks like. She mocked my rules online. But the lesson was about to get practical. By the end of the first week, the house had found a rhythm. Meals were on time. The kids said please and thank you. Even Sophie, the queen of eye rolls, had started helping her siblings with their chores without being asked. But the real test wasn't them, it was their mother. Laura hadn't called once. Not a message. Not even a simple, "How are they doing?" I decided if she wasn't going to check in, I'd show her what true responsibility looked like, not through words, but through results. Saturday morning, I woke up before the kids and packed 3 lunchboxes, sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes neatly arranged. Then I laid out their clothes on the couch. Jeans, sneakers, and colorful t-shirts. When they woke up, I announced, "We're going out." Sophie frowned. "Out where?" I smiled. "To Grandma's weekend program." Max's eyes widened. "What's that?" "You'll see," I said, grabbing my car keys. The community center was only 10 minutes away. Years ago, before I retired, I used to help run a weekend youth program there. Crafts, reading, and light sports for neighborhood kids. The staff still knew me well, and when I called earlier that week, they were thrilled to have me back as a volunteer for a few sessions. When we walked in, the kids' faces lit up. The big room buzzed with laughter and color. Tables filled with art supplies, paintbrushes, and puzzles. A corner stacked with books and a soft rug for reading time. Sophie immediately joined a group painting a banner. Max started kicking a ball with 2 boys his age. Lily sat in my lap during story time, giggling when I changed my voice for each character. By noon, they didn't want to leave. On our way home, I snapped a few photos. Nothing dramatic, just smiles, paint-smeared hands, and the caption, "Saturday mornings at Grandma's weekend program." I sent it to the family group chat. Within minutes, Mark replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Then another message. "They look so happy, Mom. Thanks for taking care of them." I could almost hear the relief in his words. An hour later, another notification. This time from Laura. Hope you're not overworking them. They're supposed to be relaxing, not running boot camps. No emoji, no humor. I smiled, set the phone down, and continued preparing dinner. The children, still energized, helped set the table. Sophie folded napkins neatly. Max carried the water jug, and Lily proudly placed the spoons one by one. I said nothing, just observed. Change doesn't always come from lectures. Sometimes, it's from example. That evening, while the kids watched a cartoon, I opened my notebook and made a small list labeled supplies used. Glue sticks, brushes, paper rolls, snacks. It wasn't about money. It was about principle. Then I sent another polite message to the family chat. Hi Laura and Mark, just a note. I've enrolled the kids in a small Saturday community program. There's a minor supply fee. I've covered it for now but will reimburse through your shared household account. Attaching the receipt below. Thanks. I attached a photo of the receipt, neatly printed. Total: $8,500. 2 minutes later, a message alert popped up. Not in the chat, but from my bank. Account credit alert. $8,500. From Mark and Laura family account. I nodded, satisfied. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a private message from Laura. Why are you billing us for stuff like this? They're kids. You're their grandmother. I typed back slowly, choosing every word with care. Yes, Laura. And as their grandmother, I'm teaching them structure and responsibility. Activities have costs. I thought you'd appreciate knowing where the money goes. No reply came. But I knew she read it. Later that night, Mark messaged privately. Mom, thank you. The kids sound happier than they've been in months. I'm sorry if Laura's tone bothered you. I'll handle it. I smiled at the message, but didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I wasn't upset. I was steady. By the next weekend, the weekend program had become their favorite thing. Sophie volunteered to help clean brushes. Max proudly showed off a drawing of our house. Lily had learned to write her name. Backward. But with confidence. At home, they followed routines without reminders. They even said grace before dinner, something they'd stopped doing at their parents' home. I knew Laura was watching. She might not approve, but she was paying attention. And then came the real satisfaction. The unspoken one. Mark sent a short video to the group chat that Sunday evening. The kids laughing in the car, singing along to a song on the radio. The caption read, "Heading home from Grandma's, best weekend ever." Laura saw it. Within minutes, I noticed she viewed the story, but didn't comment. The silence said everything. She thought leaving them here would be easy. Free babysitting, no questions, no boundaries. Instead, she got invoices, schedules, and children who were learning to respect themselves and others. As I washed the dishes that night, I looked out the window at the quiet street and thought, maybe this lesson doesn't need to be loud at all. Still, I couldn't help but smile as I saw the new bank alert come in, a payment from their joint account. She thought sending them would be cheap and easy. Instead, she got an unexpected bill. The following week, I decided to expand my circle. I'd handled everything alone long enough. But one thing retirement had taught me was that real power doesn't come from isolation. It comes from community. So, on Monday morning, I made a few phone calls. First, to Grace, an old friend from my PTA days. We'd worked together back when her son and my Mark were in secondary school. Organized, level-headed, and well-connected, she was the type of woman people listened to. When I explained my situation briefly, she chuckled. "So your daughter-in-law thinks you're doing nothing?" I smiled into the phone. Apparently retirement means available for unpaid childcare. Grace laughed. "Say no more, I'll help." By Wednesday, she'd joined our Saturday program as a volunteer coordinator. We started logging attendance sheets, activity records, and supervision notes, the kind of simple documentation every organized program keeps. Nothing dramatic, just clear records that proved these kids weren't being dumped somewhere, unattended. Every parent signed in and out, including me, for accountability. It wasn't about making trouble, it was about structure, evidence, boundaries that could speak for themselves if ever questioned. Next, I reached out to Pastor Daniel at church. I asked if the kids could attend the midweek children's group while Laura was away. He agreed instantly. "They're always welcome, Sister Evelyn." Then he added, "Would you like me to log attendance for record purposes?" I smiled. "Please do." By the end of the week, my small notebook had grown into a quiet shield, lists of names, phone numbers, sign-in logs, and receipts. Every hour someone helped, it was noted. No confrontation, no drama, just facts. Calm, steady, documented. Then, the best part came from Mrs. Cole. My neighbor 2 houses down. She was a retired nurse, gentle and reliable. One afternoon, I needed to run errands. I asked if she could watch the kids for 2 hours. She agreed happily and even charged a small fee. I paid her and noted it down in my ledger. When she tried to refuse the money, I said, "No, Mrs. Cole, we do things properly." She nodded. "You're right. People forget how important it is to respect time." That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I finally sat down with a cup of tea and opened my social media. And there it was, Laura's update. A photo of her on a beach somewhere, sunglasses on, cocktail in hand. The caption read, "Freedom feels so good. Sometimes you just have to leave everything behind and live a little." Underneath were comments from her friends. "Yas, Queen. You deserve this, babe. Let Grandma handle the chaos." I exhaled slowly. It wasn't anger I felt, it was confirmation. She wanted applause for being away. She wanted to look like the free spirit, the overworked mother, finally taking a break from responsibility. But I had something better than applause. I had quiet credibility. The next morning, I quietly took a photo of the kids painting at the community center. Their faces were bright, proud, focused. Grace stood behind them holding a clipboard. I posted it with a simple caption, "Grateful for our community of caring people, helping the children grow through structure, teamwork, and fun. Thank you to Grace, Mrs. Cole, and Pastor Daniel for your time and support." And yes, I tagged Laura and Mark. It wasn't to embarrass, it was to remind. Within hours, comments poured in. "So proud of you, Evelyn. Always teaching values through action. These kids are lucky to have you. This is what true care looks like." Even Pastor Daniel commented, "It's a blessing to see families thrive with integrity." No one mentioned Laura's trip, they didn't have to. The contrast was obvious. I knew she saw it because her name appeared under the viewed list almost instantly. She didn't comment, not one word. But later, Mark sent a private message. "Mom, your post made me emotional. You've done more for them in 2 weeks than Laura and I have in months." I replied simply, "I'm just showing them what consistency feels like." That night, I updated my notebook again, community involvement log, every name, every date, every task. Not to brag, to prove. I wasn't just babysitting, I was raising awareness, structure, and accountability. By the end of that second week, everyone in town, from the church to the PTA circle, knew that Laura's children were being cared for responsibly. Even the school principal texted me one morning, "Mrs. Evelyn, I saw the photos. The children look joyful. You're setting a fine example." When I looked at the screen, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Because while Laura wanted to look powerful online, I was building real influence offline. She wanted applause. I earned respect. And when she finally returned, she'd have to face not only me but a community that had quietly seen the truth for themselves. The kids weren't a burden. They were the bridge, the proof that doing things properly still mattered. She wanted applause for being away. Instead, the town applauded the people who actually cared for the children. I've always believed that accountability teaches faster than arguments. That week, I decided to let numbers speak louder than words. When Laura dropped the children off, I told her, politely, gently, that since she was leaving them for an extended period, I'd need a small care contribution. It wasn't about profit. It was about principle. I explained that the money would cover extra groceries, art supplies for their activities, community program fees, and transportation. She smiled, that thin, dismissive kind of smile, and waved her hand. Of course, Evelyn, whatever you need. I could tell she wasn't listening. So, I followed up in writing. That evening, I sent a text message to both her and Mark. Hello, Laura and Mark. I've prepared a small schedule for expenses while you're away. Each week, I'll log receipts and send an invoice for the kids' care. This keeps everything transparent. Thank you both for understanding. Mark replied within minutes. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate your help as always. Laura didn't reply. 2 days later, the first invoice went out. It was a neat PDF, nothing exaggerated. A few lines for groceries, school activity materials, and a community transport fee. At the bottom, I attached receipts and noted, total, $72. Care contribution transfer scheduled Friday. The transfer, processed automatically through their joint account. By Saturday morning, I had 3 missed calls from Mark. When I answered, he hesitated. Mom, Laura just saw the transaction alert. She's asking what it's for. I smiled into the phone. It's for your children's care. I sent the full breakdown in the message. Did she not see it? He sighed. She said, grandparents don't charge thing for watching their own grandkids. I took a slow breath. I see. And does she believe groceries buy themselves? Silence. Then, she'll calm down. I'll explain. But she didn't calm down. That evening, I received a message from Laura, short and sharp. This is ridiculous, Evelyn. You're not running a daycare. I thought you loved your grandchildren. I read it twice before replying. I do love them. That's why I'm teaching them structure, responsibility, and respect. These are not random fees, they're documentation. You chose to travel, so you also chose to cover their needs while you're gone. She left the message unseen. The next day, I scheduled another automatic debit, $50, into what I titled Grand Care Fund. A small account that helped cover ongoing expenses while maintaining clarity. I copied both of them in the email with a short note. This system ensures there's no confusion about financial responsibility. By Monday, I noticed something strange. The community coordinator sent me a message saying, Laura tried to pay directly for the kids' program today, but her card was declined. She said you should handle it. That confirmed what I suspected. Laura wasn't angry about the principal, she was angry about control. She wasn't used to someone else setting the terms. By midweek, I got another call from Mark, late at night, whispering like he didn't want her to hear. Mom, she's furious. She says you're trying to embarrass her. Embarrass her? I've said nothing to anyone. I replied. I know. But she's telling her friends you're charging her for babysitting. I stayed quiet for a moment, then said calmly, if she's embarrassed, perhaps it's because deep down, she knows I'm right. He didn't argue. That night, I updated my ledger. Every receipt, every time log, every text message. Not for revenge, for record keeping. 2 days later, the family group chat lit up. It started with Laura's sister posting a snide comment. Can you believe some people are charging family for helping with kids? So cold. Then another relative replied, depends on how long the help is. Everyone's time has value. Mark tried to defuse the situation, but the conversation spread fast. Eventually, one of my nieces chimed in. Grandma Evelyn does more for those kids than both their parents combined. It was clear the argument had leaked, and not from me. Later that evening, I received a text from my neighbor Mrs. Cole. Saw the chat. Don't let them guilt you, dear. You're doing the right thing. I smiled. I had never intended to humiliate anyone, but sometimes, the truth doesn't stay private. It echoes in ways you can't control. That night, another automatic payment went through. This time, Laura's response wasn't a message. It was a screenshot, her bank statement, with the line circled in red, and the caption, "Unbelievable." Underneath, she added, "Don't expect me to tolerate this." I read it once, calmly, then typed my final reply for the evening. "Laura, I don't expect you to tolerate anything. I expect you to understand the value of fairness. I'm documenting every transaction so there's no confusion later. You're welcome to settle the balance in person when you return." Then I put down my phone. The next morning, I found a voice note from Mark. His tone was quiet, weary. "Mom, she's upset. She says you're trying to teach her a lesson." I didn't deny it. "Maybe I am," I said. "Not out of spite. Out of necessity." He sighed heavily. "She's not used to boundaries." "I know," I said. "But she'll learn. We all do when the bank sends the notice. Because money has a funny way of forcing reflection where words fail." And that week, reflection was exactly what Laura needed most. When she realized money was leaving her account, she did what people do when cornered. She tried to escalate. Would you use financial boundaries to protect your time? It happened on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days earlier than planned. I was in the living room folding laundry when I heard tires screech outside. Through the curtain, I saw Laura's car pull into the driveway like a police raid. The door slammed. Voices carried. The children were in the den watching cartoons. The youngest said softly, "Grandma, Mommy's home early." My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "Stay here, sweetheart." A second later, the front door burst open. Laura stood there, sunglasses pushed up, hair wild from travel, and a fury that filled the room before her words did. "How dare you, Evelyn?" she shouted. "How dare you send me invoices? Who do you think you are, my accountant?" Her words echoed through the hallway. I set the folded towel down, straightened my back, and looked her in the eye. "Welcome home, Laura. Don't play polite with me," she snapped. "You've embarrassed me in front of my own family, charging me, posting pictures, making me look like a bad mother." I didn't flinch. "No one made you look that way, dear. You did that yourself." She blinked, thrown off by my calm tone. Then the anger returned twice as sharp. "You're petty. You're controlling. You don't even work. You sit here and meddle in everyone's lives. You're old, Evelyn. You don't understand how things are done now." Mark walked in at that moment, still in his work shirt. His face went pale. "Laura, what are you doing?" "I'm taking my kids," she said. "Right now, pack their things." The children froze, eyes wide. The oldest shook his head. "We don't want to go, Mom. We're having fun." Her face twisted. "You see? You've poisoned them against me." I spoke softly. "No, Laura. They just feel safe." Outside, my neighbor, Mrs. Cole, who'd heard the shouting, peeked over the fence. Behind her, 2 other women from my community group stopped walking and stood quietly on the sidewalk. Laura's voice rose again. "This is insane. You're not their guardian, you're just—" She stopped when I picked up a folder from the coffee table. "I thought this might happen," I said. "So I prepared something." I opened the folder and handed her a printed timeline. Every date, every photo, every activity the kids attended, each receipt, signed and logged. Screenshots of text messages. And one particular line, the one where she'd said, "You don't do anything anymore, you can watch them while I travel." She stared at the paper, silent. I could almost hear the shift, the exact second when anger met evidence. This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You're trying to make me look crazy." "No," I said, still calm. "I'm showing you what responsibility looks like. You dropped off your children without a plan." I made one. Mark took a step forward. "Laura, look at the messages. Mom didn't lie. She kept records." "Mark, you're taking her side now?" He sighed. "I'm taking the side of the truth." Laura's breathing quickened. She moved toward the kitchen, slamming the cupboard doors, muttering, "This is unbelievable." I followed slowly, keeping my tone even. Laura, sit down. Let's talk. I don't need to sit, she yelled, spinning around. I need to take my kids and go. But when she turned toward the living room, she froze again, because the children were standing with Mrs. Cole and my friend Margaret from the PTA, who had come over during the commotion. Margaret held her phone. I've been here the whole time, Laura. Evelyn's done nothing but care for those children. Laura's phone rang. She ignored it. Then it rang again, her mother's name flashing on the screen. Finally, she answered. Everyone could hear the voice through the speaker. Laura, what's going on? We're getting messages about you screaming at Evelyn. Are you trying to make things worse? Laura's eyes darted around, cornered now not by force, but by witnesses. I'm fine, Mom, she said quickly. Everything's fine. No, I said quietly. Everything's documented. Mrs. Cole nodded. We all saw how she cared for the kids. They were happy, well-fed, and safe. Laura swallowed hard. You've been gossiping about me to the whole town. I shook my head. I don't need to gossip, Laura. Truth spreads on its own. Mark looked at her. Maybe it's time you apologize. Her jaw clenched. For what? For trusting my own family? No, I said softly. For forgetting how family works. It's built on respect, not orders. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Laura's eyes glistened, part rage, part shame. You think you've won? This isn't a contest, I replied. It's a boundary. She looked around, realizing the shift. The power she once held through volume and entitlement was gone, replaced by silence, proof, and presence. I gestured to the table. Sit. We can discuss what happens next calmly, or you can leave angry. The choice is yours. She didn't move. Behind her, Mrs. Cole whispered to the children, Go play outside, loves. When the door shut behind them, Laura finally spoke, quieter now, almost trembling. You embarrassed me. I looked at her with a steady gaze. No, Laura, you embarrassed yourself. I simply let you see it. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Inside, the tension finally broke. Mark rubbed his forehead and exhaled. I think you need to go cool off, Laura. For a moment, I thought she might lash out again. But instead, she turned sharply, grabbed her bag, and stormed out. The door slammed. Mrs. Cole peered back in through the window. You handled that beautifully, Evelyn. I smiled faintly. Sometimes, the best way to end a storm is to show people their own reflection. She wanted drama. What she didn't expect was proof, witnesses, and community on my side. Would you confront a family member calmly, or match their drama with drama? The house was quiet the next morning, but my phone was not. Messages buzzed from every direction. The family group chat, the PTA chat, even old friends asking if I was all right. Word had spread faster than I expected. Someone had mentioned the scene outside my house, and by noon, it was everyone's favorite topic. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, thinking carefully. I didn't want gossip, I wanted clarity. I wanted a line drawn, not in anger, but in principle. So, I opened the family group chat. I typed slowly, reviewing every word before sending. Good morning, family. As many of you know, I recently helped take care of Mark and Laura's children while Laura traveled. During that time, I kept records of all activities, expenses, and hours, to ensure transparency. I want to be clear, grandparents are family, not unpaid staff. Helping is love, not obligation. Respect and communication keep families strong. I'm deeply grateful to everyone in the community who helped. Attached are receipts, schedules, and the full list of contributions. Nothing hidden, nothing exaggerated. Only honesty. Warm regards, Evelyn. Then I attached every file, neat, dated, labeled, and hit send. The chat went silent. Then, one by one, replies came in. A cousin. This is how family should handle things, with grace. A niece. I hope I'm this organized at your age, Aunt Evelyn. A neighbor? You set the perfect example. Even Mark's older brother chimed in. You're absolutely right. Parents should respect boundaries. You've done more than enough. Within an hour, the message had spread beyond family. Friends began reposting screenshots of the message on Facebook, praising the tone, not the drama. This is how you handle disrespect, one caption read, with facts and dignity. Meanwhile, Laura's earlier social media post, the one where she'd written, "Some people forget their place," started to backfire. The comments under it turned sharply. Your place? One relative replied. You mean the woman who raised your husband and watches your kids? Another wrote, looks like Evelyn handled your place better than you did. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. By evening, the weight of public opinion had shifted completely. Mark came by after work, face drawn but honest. He sat across from me, his voice low. Mom, I saw your message. You were right to do it. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I nodded. I don't want a war, Mark. I want respect. He sighed. She's embarrassed. But maybe she needs to be. Embarrassment fades, I said softly. Lessons stay. He nodded. She wants to talk. But she doesn't know how to start. I'll make it easy for her, I replied. Tell her she's welcome to come, if she's ready to listen. That night, my phone lit up again. A private message from Laura. I didn't mean for things to get this ugly. I was stressed. I said things I shouldn't have. I know you meant well, but I felt cornered. Can we talk? I read it twice. The tone was different, not defensive, not proud, tentative. So I replied, simply, yes. Tomorrow at 5. We'll talk here, calmly. The next day, Laura arrived quietly. No drama, no raised voice. She sat at the table across from me, hands folded. I made a fool of myself, she said. I was angry because I felt judged. But you were right. I took advantage. I said nothing. I let the silence settle until she looked up. I don't want things to stay this way, she continued. I'll do better. I leaned forward slightly. You don't owe me an apology, Laura. You owe one to yourself. Because when you treat others badly, you hurt your own peace first. She nodded, eyes red. I know. I'd like to make things right. So I handed her a printed note I'd prepared earlier. It read, Future care arrangement proposal, optional, respectful, and fair. 1. Visits scheduled in advance. 2. Contributions for food and activities as needed. 3. Shared communication about travel or plans. 4. No assumptions, always requests. 5. Everyone treated with gratitude. She read it slowly. You made this? Yes, I said. Because I still want the kids around. I love them. But love needs order, or it turns into resentment. For the first time since the whole ordeal began, Laura smiled. A small, tired smile. I think I needed to hear that. Mark walked in near the end of our talk. His shoulders relaxed when he saw us both calm. How's it going? He asked. I looked at him. Progress. He smiled faintly. That's all I wanted. Before she left, Laura paused at the door. Thank you for not humiliating me worse, she said softly. I shook my head. The goal was never humiliation. It was understanding. She nodded, then drove away quietly. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky fade into pink and gold. My phone buzzed again. A message from one of my old coworkers. You handled that with more grace than most people could. Thank you for reminding everyone what dignity looks like. I smiled. The storm had cleared, but the air was cleaner because of it. She could choose to learn, or double down. Her next move would decide everything. The morning after the public reckoning, the house felt quiet for the first time in weeks. The grandchildren had gone back home with their parents, and I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea and waiting. I knew there would be a call or a visit. Pride always breaks before clarity comes. It came around noon. Mark's message was short. She wants to talk, "Can we come by this evening?" I typed back one word. "Yes." When they arrived, Mark looked tired but calm. Laura was different. Her usual sharpness was gone. She sat down across from me, holding her phone as if it could protect her. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sound of the old wall clock filled the silence. Finally, Laura took a breath. "I owe you an apology," she said. Her voice was low. "I acted entitled. I took advantage of you because I thought, that's what grandparents do. I didn't think about your time, your rest, or your own life." Mark nodded beside her. "I should have stopped it earlier, Mom. I saw it happening and said nothing. I let them talk. I wanted to hear everything before I spoke." Laura continued, explaining how she felt overwhelmed by work and pressure to keep up appearances. She admitted that when I retired, she assumed I would always be available. She said she was wrong. When she finished, I leaned back and folded my hands. "I accept your apology," I said. "But apology without structure doesn't change behavior. We need rules that protect everyone." Mark agreed immediately. "We talked about that. We think it's fair to set clear terms." Together, we drafted what we later called the Family Care Agreement. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was common sense written down. The terms were simple. First, any child care request must come at least 2 weeks in advance. No surprise drop-offs. Second, if I was to keep the children for more than a day, there would be a contribution toward groceries, utilities, and activities. Not a fee. A contribution. Third, respect had to be mutual. That meant no dismissive comments, no guilt trips, and no expectations beyond what was agreed upon. As I spoke, Laura nodded slowly. "That's fair," she said. "I didn't realize how much I was asking until now." The conversation stayed calm. No shouting. No tears. Only honesty. Before they left, the grandchildren came running to me, laughing, asking when they could come again. I hugged them and smiled. "Soon," I said. "But next time, we'll plan it together." For the first time, Laura smiled back without tension. "I'd like that." After they drove away, I looked at the signed paper on the table. A small signature, a small change, but a large shift in understanding. The next few weeks passed smoothly. Laura stuck to the agreement. She called ahead. She offered contributions without being asked. When she traveled again, she left a detailed schedule, emergency contacts, and even prepaid for groceries. The children arrived with smiles instead of confusion. They understood the new order. They helped around the house, followed bedtime, and even reminded each other, "Grandma's house, Grandma's rules." I started to feel the balance return. It wasn't about control, it was about respect. One evening, Mark came alone to visit. We sat outside on the porch, watching the sky darken. "You know," he said, "this whole thing changed Laura more than I expected. She told me she never realized how much work parenting takes when you don't have someone picking up your slack." I smiled. "That's the lesson experience teaches. Sometimes you have to let people face the cost of their comfort." He nodded. "She wants to do better. We both do." The peace felt real, not perfect, but solid. Then came the true test. A month later, Laura called again. This time her tone was different, polite, and measured. "Evelyn, there's a conference I can't avoid. Would it be all right if the kids stayed with you for 3 days next month? I'll transfer funds for groceries today, and I'll drop off their schoolwork this weekend." I smiled to myself. Growth. "Yes, that works," I said. "Send me the exact dates." She did. Everything ran smoothly. The lesson had settled in. Respect built stability. The children saw their parents working together instead of arguing. They saw adults taking responsibility. They saw love paired with boundaries. At the end of that visit, Laura thanked me in front of the kids. "Grandma taught us how to be organized," she told them. They all laughed, and I felt a quiet satisfaction bloom in my chest. That night, as I sat by the window, I thought about how far we had come. From a demanding phone call to a written agreement. from resentment to understanding. People often think setting boundaries causes distance. In truth, it creates closeness that lasts. Because when respect is mutual, love can breathe again. The agreement held for a time. It worked because we all wanted it to. But I knew, deep down, life always tests lessons learned. And one day, that test would come again. The agreement was held for a time, but the real test of change is always later. Would you accept a written agreement to protect boundaries in your family? The following weeks unfolded in peace. The noise, tension, and quiet resentment that once filled my home were replaced by laughter, calm schedules, and a sense of balance I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, my retirement felt like retirement. The grandchildren now visited on planned weekends and holidays. Each visit had structure and joy. I prepared simple meals, we baked cookies, and I read them stories in the evening before bed. There were no rushed calls, no last-minute drop-offs, no manipulation. Just time spent together that felt honest and warm. Mark and I spoke more often. He stopped calling only when there was a crisis. Instead, he called to chat, to share small family updates, to tell me the kids were doing well. Sometimes he'd ask for advice about work or home repairs. I could tell he felt lighter too. Laura followed the family agreement, not perfectly, but sincerely. Once or twice, she forgot a notice or delayed a transfer, but she would message immediately to apologize and make it right. I noticed the difference in tone: no entitlement, no sarcasm, no guilt trips. She sounded like someone who had learned a hard but necessary truth. One afternoon, while the kids were drawing at the kitchen table, Laura stopped by early. She had a calm smile and a bag of groceries. "I brought these for next weekend," she said. "I know you don't like surprises." I thanked her and invited her in. We sat together while the children played. For the first time in years, the air between us felt peaceful. She admitted she used to think I was trying to control her family. "I didn't understand boundaries," she said. "I thought help meant surrender." I nodded. "And I thought silence meant peace," I replied. "But sometimes silence only gives people permission to take more." We both smiled at that. It was an honest exchange, not about blame, but about awareness. Later that night, after they left, I sat on the porch and reflected on everything that had happened. The phone call that started it all felt like a lifetime ago. The voice that once said, "You don't do anything anymore, you can watch the kids," now said, "Thank you for helping us stay organized." It was proof that not every lesson requires shouting or revenge. Sometimes it requires patience, documentation, and quiet resolve. I thought about the moment I decided to stay calm instead of exploding. That choice had changed everything. Anger might have felt satisfying for a moment, but strategy created lasting respect. It reminded me that strength doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes, it comes from control over your reactions, your space, and your peace. The truth is, grandparents deserve dignity. Retirement does not erase the right to rest or the freedom to choose when to help. Love should never be treated as unpaid labor. Over the next few months, our family gatherings became easier. Birthdays were shared, conversations were relaxed. Even the children seemed to notice. They would tell their friends, "Grandma has rules, but she's fun." That was enough for me. One day. During a quiet afternoon, Laura sent me a short text. "Thank you for teaching me without yelling," she wrote. "I see now that boundaries are not rejection. They're guidance." I stared at the message for a while, smiling. Maybe that was the real victory, not that she obeyed the rules, but that she understood the reason behind them. I had preserved my peace without breaking the family. I had chosen strategy over anger, firmness over complaint. And through that, I taught everyone that love paired with respect creates the healthiest kind of home. I knew other people in my position, grandparents worn down by guilt, afraid to say no, constantly manipulated under the label of family duty. I wished they could see what I saw now. Protecting your time isn't selfish. It's responsible. Because when you give everything without boundaries, resentment grows. But when you give within reason, love flourishes. The lesson was simple. You cannot teach others to value you unless you value yourself first. That night, I took out the small notebook where I had first written the list of house rules. I read through them again, smiling at the notes, and crossed out reminders. At the bottom, I added one final line. Peace is the reward for courage. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and sat quietly in the glow of the evening. Laura had once expected me to fold, to give in, to accept her demands without protest. She had mistaken my silence for weakness. But silence, when used with intention, is preparation. She never expected my move. She expected old stubbornness. What she got was quiet strength and a rulebook she could not ignore. The house was calm, the children were happy, the boundaries stood firm, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly respected. She never expected my move. She expected old stubbornness. What she got was quiet strength and a rulebook she could not ignore. If this story made you think about boundaries in your family, subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, love, and quiet justice.